The age-old question, when should I update my trust? Is there some magic timeline? Should you revisit it every 5 years, every time you buy a new house? Or is it one of those things where you just do it once and never look back at it again? And as with most legal questions, the answer is the ever frustrating, it depends. But here's the good news. There are some clear situations where you absolutely should update your trust, some cases where it's a good idea, and a whole lot of times where you really don't need to touch it at all. So let's talk about when you should update your trust, when you can leave it alone, and when you absolutely, positively need to make a change before things get messy. Be sure to like and subscribe, comment down below if you've got any questions, but enough waffling, let's get into it. First, let's talk about how you actually make changes to a trust. Not all amendments are the same, and depending on what you need to do, you'll either be making a simple amendment or a full restatement. An amendment is exactly what it sounds like. You're making a small tweak to the trust while leaving everything else intact. Maybe you just need to swap out a trustee, add a specific gift, or adjust the distribution percentages. These are easy fixes. A full restatement, though, is when you rewrite the entire trust. The only thing that stays the same is the name of the trust, which is important because it means you don't have to go through the hassle of retitling assets. A full restatement makes sense when there's been a major change in your life, like a death, divorce, or a complete shift in how you want things to be handled. One of the most common reasons people update their trust is when they want to make a small change. Maybe they've decided that one of your kids has proven to be a financial disaster, and you'd rather put their inheritance in a trust instead of handing it over to them outright. Or maybe you want to add a cash gift to your grandkids, say $10,000 each. Simple amendments like these are quick and easy to do. Another common reason, though, changing who's in charge. A lot of people name their kids as successor trustees when they first set up their trust. But sometimes, as the years go by, you realize maybe that wasn't the best idea. Maybe your oldest child is now in a different state and completely unreachable. Or maybe your youngest, who was in college when you first set up the trust, is now a responsible adult who's actually better suited for the job as trustee. Updating your trustee list is one of those things that doesn't require a complete overhaul of your trust. It's just a matter of swapping a name. However, let's talk about the big stuff. The things that don't just require a little tweak, but instead mean you need to take a good hard look at your trust and possibly rewrite the whole thing. One of the biggest reasons people need to do a full restatement is a change in marital status. If you're married and your spouse passes away, your trust likely needs to be adjusted to reflect that. If you're divorced, well, you probably don't want your ex inheriting your assets or managing your trust after you're gone. And if you're remarried, you absolutely need to revisit your trust to make sure that your new spouse and any kids from a previous marriage are taken care of the way that you want. Another major event concerns children, the birth of a new child or grandchild. If you set up your trust when you only had one child and then more kids later on, you do need to update it to make sure that they are all included. Likewise, if one of your children has passed away, your trust needs to reflect that as well. If they had kids of their own, do you want their share to go to them? If not, what happens to it? These are all questions that need to be answered in your trust, and if you don't update it, state law might make the decision for you. Or worse yet, your case may be the example for new case law on stepchildren inheritances, omitted children, or forgotten spouses. You would think all of this would have been figured out by now, but I'm still covering very recent cases on these topics a few times a year. I'll link to some of those videos in the corner and in the description down below in case you're curious. Now, I know it's hard to find humor in something as dark as the death of a spouse or a child, but I will say this. The one thing worse than dealing with grief is dealing with grief and a legal mess all at the same time. A little planning now can save your family from a major headache later on. Switching gears a bit though, a question I get all the time is, if I buy a new house, do I need to update my trust? And the answer is probably not. Here's the thing. Most trusts already include a section listing out assets, sometimes called a schedule. When you buy a new property, as long as it's titled correctly in the trust's name, it's already covered. No amendment needed. Now, if you want that new property to go to a specific person, say one child gets house A and the other gets house B, then yes, you should update your trust to reflect that. But if you're just adding property without changing your distribution plan, you're fine as long as it's properly titled. That being said, always double check your title. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people buy a property forget to put it into their trust, which leads to a probate situation, which is exactly what the trust was supposed to avoid in the first place. Let's say you never touch your trust after signing it. Is that a problem? Well, not necessarily. If your trust was well drafted, like ours, and nothing in your life changes, it'll still do what it's supposed to do. But here's where things can get a little tricky. If laws change, and they do, your trust might not be constructed in the best way anymore. For example, tax laws are constantly shifting, and if your trust was written under one set of rules that no longer applies, then it might need an update in order to maximize tax benefits. And then there's the issue of outdated trustees. If the person you originally named to manage your trust is no longer around or capable of handling the job, your family could be left scrambling. It's always a good idea to revisit your trustee list every few years just to make sure that it still makes sense. Estate planning isn't something you need to constantly be redoing. If your trust is solid, well drafted, and still fits your wishes, then leave it alone. But if you've had a major life change, a death, a divorce, a remarriage, a new child, then you need to update it. So here's my advice. Every few years, sit down and ask yourself, does my trust still reflect what I want? If the answer is yes, great, you're done. If not, make the necessary changes now before it becomes a problem later. And if you're still not sure, call your estate planning attorney. Worst case, they tell you everything looks fine and you go about your day. Best case, you fix something now that could have caused a massive issue later on. Now, tell me, when was the last time you checked your trust? Do you think you might need an update? Or did this just remind you that you probably should? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you found this video helpful, like, subscribe, share the video with your spouse, partner, or your kids. I'm attorney Andrew Bethel, and I'll see you at our next meeting.